Captain Rick stood on the bridge of his battlecruiser, watching the stars through the massive viewing screen. The same stars he had been watching for the past 20 years. The same empty space where his enemies would appear, just like they had. Appeared yesterday, and the day before that, every day for as long as anyone could remember. The war between the Karathi Empire and the Valen Republic had been going on for 312 years. Rick's grandfather had fought in this war. His father had died in this war. Now Rick's commanded one of the most powerful ships in the Karathi fleet, and he would probably die in this war too. It was the way things had always been. The communication panel made a soft beeping sound. Officer Mex turned toward his captain with the same tired expression he wore every day. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up Valen ships approaching Sector 7. Standard formation, 3 heavy cruisers and 5 support vessels." Rix nodded slowly. Of course they were coming. The Valen always attacked on the 3rd day of each week, just after their morning prayers. Korathi would respond with their own standard formation. They would meet in the middle of the contested space, exchange formal challenges over the radio, and then begin the careful dance of battle that could last anywhere from 6 hours to 3 days. "Prepare the fleet for engagement," Rick said, his voice carrying no excitement or fear. It's just the same steady tone he had used for thousands of similar battles. "Formation pattern Delta. Send word to the other captains that we will meet the enemy with honor." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this so many times that they could probably fight a battle in their sleep. Every action was planned, every movement predictable. The Karathi had developed their fighting style over centuries of warfare. It had served them well enough to survive this long. Rix watched as his ships moved into position. The Karathi battle formation was a thing of beauty, he had to admit. Each ship took its proper place in the geometric pattern that had been perfected by their ancestors. The heavy cruisers formed the center, their massive energy shields glowing with blue light. The smaller ships spread out in a perfect circle around them, creating overlapping fields of fire that could protect the larger vessels. The Valen had their own formations, of course. Their ships were sleeker than Korathi vessels, with smooth curves and silver holes that reflected the light of nearby stars. They preferred to fight in long lines, each ship supporting the others with coordinated energy blasts. It was an effective strategy that had allowed them to hold their territory for over 3 centuries. But that was the problem. Both sides were too evenly matched. The Karathi had stronger shields and more powerful weapons, but the Valen ships were faster and more maneuverable. Every advantage one side had was balanced by a corresponding strength on the other side. The result was an endless stalemate that consumed resources and lives without ever producing a real winner. "Enemy ships are in range, sir," reported Lieutenant Kex from the weapons station. "They are broadcasting the formal challenge." Rick straightened in his command chair. This was the part of battle that still meant something to him. The ritual exchange of words before combat began. It was one of the few traditions that both sides still respected, even after all these years of war. "Put them on screen," he ordered. The image of a Valen captain appeared on the main display. The alien looked similar to the Korathi in many ways, with the same basic body structure and facial features. The main differences were in the small details. Where Karathi had tough gray skin and dark eyes, the Valen had pale, almost translucent skin, and eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Captain Rix of the Karathi Empire," the Valen commander said in the formal tone used for such occasions. "I am Captain Vel of the Valen Republic. We meet again in the void between our worlds." "Captain Vel," Rix replied with equal formality.
"Your ships have entered Korathi space. We must ask you to withdraw or face the consequences
"Of your actions. This space belongs to the Valen people, as it has for generations beyond counting. It is you who must withdraw or face our righteous anger." It was the same conversation they had been having for 3 centuries. Neither side would back down because backing down would mean losing face. And losing face was worse than losing ships or even losing lives. Both civilizations had built their entire cultures around concepts of honor and duty that made compromise impossible. "Very well," Rick said. "We shall settle this matter in the traditional way. May the strongest fleet claim victory." "May the strongest fleet claim victory," Vel replied, and the communication ended. Now came the actual fighting. Rix gave the order to advance, and his ships moved forward in their perfect formation. The Valen fleet approached from the opposite direction, their vessels arranged in the long line formation they had used for as long as anyone could remember. The two fleets met in the middle of the contested space and began their deadly dance. Energy beams lanced back and forth between the ships, lighting up the darkness with brilliant flashes of red and blue light. Shields flared and sparked as they absorbed the incoming fire. Smaller ships darted around the larger vessels, trying to find weak points in their defenses. It was beautiful in its own way. The precise movements of the ships, the coordinated attacks, the way each captain knew exactly what the others would do next. Both sides had been fighting this same battle for so long that it had become almost like a piece of music, with each ship playing its part in a symphony of destruction, but it was also pointless. Rix watched as one of his cruisers took heavy damage and was forced to retreat. A few minutes later, a Valen destroyer exploded in a ball of fire, its crew lost to the void. Ships on both sides would be damaged or destroyed, crews would die, and in the end, nothing would change. Tomorrow, or next week, they would meet again in the same place and fight the same battle. The engagement lasted for 8 hours. When it was over, both fleets withdrew to their respective territories to repair their ships and tend to their wounded. The contested space remained contested. The war continued, as it always had and always would. Rix stood on his bridge, looking out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, Captain Vel was probably doing the same thing. Two professional soldiers, locked in an eternal struggle that neither of them really understood anymore. They fought because their fathers had fought, and their fathers had fought. Because their fathers had fought, the war had become its own reason for existing. It was the only thing either civilization really knew how to do anymore. Deep in the monitoring station on the edge of Valen space, Technical Officer Bix was having a very boring day. She sat at her console, watching the same readouts she had been watching for the past 5 years. A long-range sensor swept the empty regions beyond their territory, looking for anything unusual. They never found anything unusual. The job was important, in theory. If an enemy fleet tried to sneak around and attack from an unexpected direction, the monitoring stations would be the first to detect them. But in practice, neither the Karathi nor the Valen ever tried sneak attacks. Both sides considered such tactics to be dishonorable. They always announced their intentions and attacked from predictable directions. Bix was thinking about what she would have for dinner when her console started making a sound she had never heard before. Instead of the steady beeping that indicated normal space traffic, there was a chaotic mixture of tones that seemed to make no sense at all. She frowned and checked her instruments. According to the readings, something was approaching from the outer rim of the galaxy. Something big. But the signature was completely wrong. It did not match any known ship design from either civilization. "Commander Locke," she called to her supervisor. "I think you should look at this." Commander Locke was an older Valen who had been running monitoring stations for most of his adult life. He had seen every type of sensor reading that was possible to see, or at least he thought he had. He walked over to Bix's station with the tired expression of someone who expected to find a minor technical malfunction. "What is the problem?" he asked. "Sir, I am picking up something strange on the long-range sensors. The computer cannot identify the ship type, and the warp signature does not match anything in our database." Locke looked at the display and felt his chest tighten. The readings were indeed unlike anything he had ever seen. The warp signature was crude and unstable, as if whoever built the ships did not really understand how warp drives were supposed to work. But there were a lot of them. The computer was counting at least 30 separate vessels, possibly more. "Are you certain these are ships?" he asked. "Could they be asteroids or some kind of natural phenomenon?" Bix shook her head. "No, sir. They're definitely artificial. The energy patterns are too regular to be natural. But they are not like our ships, or Korathi ships either. The design philosophy seems completely different." Locke stared at the screen for several long minutes. In over 300 years of war, no third party had ever interfered in the conflict between the Korathi and Valen. Both civilizations had always assumed they were the only advanced species in this region of space. The idea that someone else might exist had never seriously been considered. "Send a message to Fleet Command," he ordered. "Tell them we have detected unknown vessels approaching our territory. Request instructions." The response came back within an hour. Fleet Command was skeptical. It suggested that the monitoring station had probably detected some kind of sensor ghost, or maybe a small group of pirates using stolen technology. The admiral in charge of the sector did not seem particularly concerned, but Locke was concerned. He had been watching sensors for 40 years, and he knew the difference between a ghost reading and real ships. These were real ships, and they were getting closer. 3 days later, the unknown fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. Locke's monitoring station got its first clear look at the mysterious vessels, and what he saw made him question everything he thought he knew about ship design. The unknown ships were ugly. There was no other word for it. Were both Corinthian. Valen vessels were built with smooth, elegant lines that reflected their maker's sense of beauty. These ships looked like they had been thrown together by someone who cared nothing for appearance. They were covered with strange projections and antenna arrays. Some of them seemed to be built from multiple smaller ships that had been welded together. But despite their crude appearance, the ships were clearly advanced. They moved with purpose and coordination. Their formation was loose and informal compared to the rigid patterns used by both sides in the war. But there was an underlying discipline that suggested professional military crews. "Sir," Bix said, her voice tight with nervousness. "They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The message is in an unknown language, but the computer thinks it might be some kind of greeting." Locke nodded. "Route the transmission to Fleet Command, and prepare to evacuate the station if necessary." The unknown ships continued deeper into the system. They seemed to be conducting some kind of survey, sending out small scout vessels to examine planets and asteroid fields. Their behavior was curious rather than aggressive, but Locke had no way of knowing what their real intentions might be. Hours passed. Then, without warning, a new group of ships appeared. These ones came from the opposite direction, and their design was immediately recognizable. Korathi battlecruisers, approaching at maximum speed. Locke realized what was happening. The Korathi had detected the unknown ships too, and they were coming to investigate, or possibly to attack. The unknown vessels were caught between Korathi space and Valen space, and both sides would probably consider them to be invaders. The Korathi fleet took up a standard battle formation and broadcast the usual formal challenge. But the unknown ships did not respond in the expected way. Instead of arranging themselves for ritual combat, they scattered in all directions. Some of them accelerated toward the edge of the system. Others moved to defensive positions behind asteroids and debris. "Sir," Bix said, "I think they are trying to avoid a fight." But avoiding a fight was not something the Korathi understood. To them, any ship that entered their territory without permission was an enemy that needed to be dealt with. The Korathi fleet began to close in on the nearest unknown vessel. That was when everything went wrong. The unknown ship that was being targeted suddenly stopped trying to run. Instead, it turned and accelerated directly toward the largest Korathi cruiser. For a moment, Locke thought it was going to ram the enemy's ship. Ramming attacks were considered deeply dishonorable by both civilizations, something that only desperate pirates might attempt. But the unknown ship did not ram the Korathi vessel. Instead, it opened fire from point-blank range with weapons that neither the Korathi nor the Valen had ever seen before. Instead of energy beams or plasma charges, the unknown ship fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. The Korathi cruisers, shields designed to deflect energy weapons, offered no protection against the kinetic attack. The projectiles tore through the Korathi ship's hull like it was made of paper. Secondary explosions ripped through the interior as critical systems were destroyed. Within seconds, one of the most powerful warships in the Korathi fleet was reduced to a drifting wreck. The other Korathi ships immediately opened fire on the unknown vessel. But their target did not stand still to receive the attack, as honor demanded. Instead, it launched a cloud of small objects that seemed to move independently. Some kind of automated weapons that swarmed around the Korathi ships, attacking from multiple directions at once. Locke watched in horror as the battle unfolded. Everything about the way the unknown ships fought was wrong. They used dirty tricks and dishonorable tactics. They attacked from ambush positions. They seemed to have no concept of fair play or ritual combat, but they were winning. One by one, the Korathi ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors fled back toward their own territory, broadcasting emergency messages about the new threat they had encountered. When the battle was over, the unknown ships regrouped and continued their survey of the system. They acted as if the fight had been a minor inconvenience rather than a significant military engagement. Some of them began salvaging wreckage from the destroyed Korathi vessels. Sir Bix said quietly, "What do we do now?" Locke stared at the tactical display. The unknown ships were still out there, and now they had proven they were willing and able to fight. But more importantly, they had demonstrated fighting techniques that made traditional fleet tactics look obsolete. "Send another message to Fleet Command," he said. "Tell them the galaxy just got a lot more dangerous." Admiral Cross stood in the command center of the exploration ship Liberty, studying the tactical display with growing concern. The fleet had been traveling for 8 months to reach this region of space. Following long-range sensor readings that suggested the presence of advanced civilizations, what they had found was a war zone. "Status report," he ordered. Commander West stepped forward, carrying a data pad filled with information their scout ships had gathered. "Sir, we have confirmed the presence of 2 distinct alien civilizations, engaged in active warfare. Initial analysis suggests the conflict has been ongoing for several centuries. Both sides appear to have roughly equivalent technology levels, which explains why neither has achieved decisive victory." Cross nodded. Studying the star charts that showed the positions of various fleets and battle zones, humanity had spent decades searching for signs of intelligent life in the universe. Finding not 1 but 2 advanced civilizations should have been cause for celebration. Instead, they had stumbled into the middle of someone else's war. "Any attempts at communication?" he asked. "We have been monitoring their transmissions for the past week," West replied. "Both civilizations use similar communication protocols, but we have not yet attempted direct contact. The translator programs are still working on their languages." "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Davis from the communications station, "we are receiving a priority transmission from the scout ship Ranger. They report contact with unknown vessels." Cross felt his stomach tighten. The Ranger was one of their smallest ships, crewed by only 12 people. If it had encountered hostile aliens, there might not be much they could do to help. "Put them on screen," he ordered. The image of Captain Troy appeared on the main display. The young officer looked nervous but alert. Behind him, Cross could see the bridge of the scout ship, with crew members working frantically at their stations. "Admiral, we have encountered a group of alien vessels. They appear to be from one of the 2 civilizations we have been observing. The ships are approaching our position and broadcasting some kind of formal message. What is your current status? You're maintaining position and attempting to establish peaceful communication. The aliens seem to be following some kind of protocol, but we cannot understand what they want." Cross made a quick decision. "Maintain your current position, but be prepared to withdraw if the situation becomes hostile. We are moving to support you." The main fleet began advancing toward the Ranger's position. Cross hoped they would arrive in time to prevent any misunderstanding that might lead to violence. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence should be a moment of historic importance, not a tragic accident. But as they got closer to the scene, Cross realized that the situation was already spiraling out of control. The alien ships had surrounded the Ranger in what appeared to be a formal battle formation. They were broadcasting continuously, and the translation programs had finally begun to make sense of their messages. What they were hearing made Cross's blood run cold. "Admiral," reported Davis, "the translation system is picking up what appears to be some kind of challenge or ultimatum. The aliens seem to be demanding that the Rangers submit to some kind of inspection or ritual combat." Cross cursed under his breath. The aliens were treating first contact like a military engagement, following whatever rules and traditions govern their warfare. They probably had no idea that they were dealing with a peaceful exploration mission. "Try to respond," he ordered. "Tell them we are peaceful explorers who mean no harm." But the aliens did not seem to understand the concept of peaceful exploration. Their formation tightened around the Ranger, and energy readings indicated they were charging their weapon systems. That was when Lieutenant Beck made the decision that changed everything. Beck was the weapons officer aboard the Ranger, a young man who had joined the exploration fleet hoping to see the wonders of the galaxy. He had never expected to find himself in a combat situation, surrounded by hostile aliens who seemed determined to start a fight. When he saw the alien weapons powering up, Beck did what his training had taught him to do: activated the Rangers' defensive systems and prepared to protect his ship and crew. The Ranger was small, but it was still a human military vessel with the latest defensive technology. The aliens seemed to interpret the activation of defensive systems as an act of aggression. Without warning, they opened fire. Energy beams lanced out from the alien ships, striking the Rangers' shields. The small human vessel shook under the impact, but its shields held. The alien weapons were powerful, but they were designed for fighting. Other aliens who used similar technology. Beck looked at his captain, waiting for orders. Troy's face was pale, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Return fire," he ordered. "Protect the ship." Beck pressed the firing controls and the Rangers' weapon systems came online. But these were not the energy weapons the aliens were expecting. Human military doctrine had developed along different lines, emphasizing kinetic weapons and explosive projectiles over beam weapons. The Ranger fired a spread of guided missiles at the nearest alien ship. The missiles were small, but they were fast and smart, designed to penetrate enemy defenses and deliver explosive warheads directly to critical systems. The alien ship's shields, designed to deflect energy beams, offered no protection against physical projectiles. The missiles punched through the defensive barrier and detonated inside the alien vessel's hull. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship as critical systems failed. The alien ship broke apart in seconds. Its crew lost to the vacuum of space. The other alien vessels immediately intensified their attack, but Beck had already launched a second wave of missiles. He also activated the Rangers' point defense systems, filling the space around the ship with clouds of high velocity projectiles designed to intercept incoming attacks. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Their concept of space combat involved large ships standing off at long range and exchanging energy blasts until one side's shields failed. The idea of filling the battle space with thousands of small, fast-moving projectiles was completely foreign to them. Within minutes, 3 more alien ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors fled toward their home territory, broadcasting emergency signals. Admiral Cross arrived to find the Ranger drifting alone in space, surrounded by debris from the destroyed alien vessels. The young crew was shaken but alive, trying to understand what had just happened. Status report Cross demanded as soon as he was connected to the Ranger. Captain Troy's voice was hoarse with exhaustion. "Sir, the aliens attacked without warning. We defended ourselves as best we could. But sir, I think we may have just started a war." Cross stared at the tactical display, which showed the wreckage of alien ships scattered across several thousand kilometers of space. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence had turned into a massacre, and it was entirely possible that both alien civilizations would now consider humans to be a hostile threat. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," he ordered. "Need to report what has happened here, and we need to do it fast." Both alien factions are going to learn about this engagement, and they are going to want answers. As the fleet regrouped and began moving toward a safer position, Cross found himself wondering if humanity had just made the greatest mistake in its history. They had come to the stars looking for friends and knowledge. Instead, they had found war. They had proven to be very good at it. The aliens had been fighting their ritualized, predictable war for centuries. But now there was a new player in the game, one that did not follow the established rules. Humanity had brought its own way of fighting to the stars, and that way of fighting was about to change everything. Cross looked out at the alien wreckage drifting past his ship and realized that the galaxy would never be the same again. The war that had been going on for 300 years was about to become something completely different. Something much more dangerous, and humanity was right in the middle of it. The news of the human attack spread through both fleets faster than anyone had expected. Within hours, every ship captain in the sector knew that a new force had entered the war. And this force fought unlike anything they had ever seen before. Captain Fox commanded the human destroyer Swift, one of the smaller ships in Admiral Cross's fleet. She had been a military officer for 15 years, but she had never fought aliens before. The reports coming in from other human ships painted a picture of enemies who were powerful but predictable, following ancient rules that made them vulnerable to modern human tactics. Fox studied the intelligence reports. While her ship moved through the asteroid field that marked the border between Karathi and Valen space, the aliens had been fighting each other for so long that they had forgotten how to adapt to new threats. They expected their enemies to follow the same honor codes and battle rituals that had governed warfare for centuries. "Captain," called Lieutenant Gray from the sensor station, "we have multiple contacts approaching. Looks like a Karathi supply convoy, 6 transport ships with 2 escort cruisers." Fox looked at the tactical display. The Karathi ships were moving in their standard formation, completely unaware that human vessels were in the area. The convoy was carrying supplies to a forward base, following the same route they had probably used for years. "Are they broadcasting any communications?" Fox asked. "Standard convoy chatter, ma'am. They seem to be discussing their delivery schedule and estimated arrival time. No mention of us." Fox made her decision quickly. The convoy was a legitimate military target, and destroying it would disrupt Karathi operations in this sector. More importantly, it would send a message to both alien civilizations that humans were not bound by their traditional rules of warfare. "Battle stations," she ordered. "We are going to hit them fast and hard, then get out before reinforcements arrive." The Swift moved closer to the convoy, using the asteroids for cover. Human stealth technology was far superior to anything the aliens possessed, and the ship remained invisible to their sensors until it was almost close enough to touch. Fox waited until the convoy was strung out in a long line, then gave the order to attack. The Swift emerged from behind a large asteroid and opened fire with everything it had. Missiles, railgun rounds, and particle beams all struck the lead transport ship. Simultaneously, the Karathi vessel exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the asteroid field. Debris scattered in all directions, some of it striking the other ships in the convoy. The aliens had never experienced an ambush attack before. They had no idea how to respond. The escort cruisers tried to turn and fight. The Swift was already moving to its next target. Fox had studied the intelligence reports carefully, and she knew exactly where the Karathi ships were most vulnerable. She ordered concentrated fire on the engine sections of the transport vessels, crippling them without completely destroying them. "Target the life support systems on the escort cruisers," she ordered. "Force them to surrender or abandon ship." It was a tactic that would have been considered deeply dishonorable by both alien civilizations. In their traditional warfare, ships fought until they were destroyed or until their crews died heroically at their posts. The idea of forcing an enemy to surrender by threatening non-combatant crew members was unthinkable, but it worked. Faced with the choice between watching their crews suffocate in disabled ships or surrendering to an enemy they did not understand, the Karathi captains chose surrender. For the first time in centuries, alien ships lowered their weapons and broadcast surrender signals. Fox accepted their surrender. But she did not follow the traditional protocols for dealing with captured enemies. Instead of taking the aliens prisoner or allowing them to return home with honor, she gave them a message to deliver to their commanders. "Tell your leaders that humans do not follow your rules," she said over the communication channel. "We fight to win, not to play games. Stay out of our way, and we will stay out of yours." Then she destroyed the abandoned transport ships and left the area, leaving the Karathi survivors to find their own way home in damaged vessels. The attack on the convoy was just the beginning. Over the next few days, human ships struck targets throughout the sector, using tactics that the aliens had never seen before. They attacked supply lines, communication stations, and isolated outposts. They used electronic warfare to disable enemy ships without firing a shot. They even launched cyber attacks that turned alien computer systems against their own operators. General Price was the human officer in charge of strategic operations for the sector. He had spent his career studying military history and tactics, and he understood something that the aliens did not. War was not a game or a ritual. It was a tool for achieving political objectives, and the side that used it most effectively would win. Price coordinated a series of attacks that hit both alien civilizations simultaneously, while Korathi and Valan fleets were positioning themselves for another of their traditional battles. Human ships struck at the bases and supply depots that supported both forces. The aliens found themselves fighting a war on multiple fronts, against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Human ships would appear without warning, destroy their targets, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. They used the aliens' own predictable behavior against them, setting traps and ambushes that exploited their rigid tactical doctrines. More importantly, the humans began to turn the two alien civilizations against each other in new ways. Price ordered his intelligence officers to intercept communications between Korathi and Valan commanders, then selectively edit and retransmit them to create confusion and mistrust. The Korathi began to suspect that the Valan were secretly cooperating with the humans. The Valan started to believe that the Korathi had somehow allied themselves with the mysterious new force. Both sides began to see treachery and conspiracy where none existed, and their ancient enmity deepened into something approaching paranoia. Captain Rix found himself facing a situation he had never imagined. His fleet was under constant attack from an invisible enemy. His supply lines were being cut, and his own allies were beginning to question his loyalty. The war that had been predictable for centuries had become a nightmare of uncertainty and chaos. "Sir," reported Officer Mex, "we have lost contact with 3 more outposts in the past hour. Intelligence believes they have been destroyed by human forces." Rick stared at the tactical display, which showed the locations of known and suspected human attacks. There was no pattern that he could identify, no logic that followed the traditional rules of warfare. The humans seemed to strike wherever they could do the most damage, without regard for honor or fair play. "What do our analysts say about human capabilities?" he asked. "Sir, they estimate that the human fleet has no more than 50 ships total. But they are achieving results that would normally require a force 10 times that size. Their tactical efficiency is unlike anything we have encountered." Rix felt a chill run down his spine. 50 ships. His own fleet had over 300 vessels, and the Valan had a similar number. By all traditional measures, the humans should be outnumbered and outgunned. Yet they were winning. The realization that came to him was deeply disturbing. For 3 centuries, both the Korathi and Valan had been fighting a war that was more ritual than conflict. They had developed elaborate rules and traditions that governed how battles were fought. These rules had become more important than actually winning. But the humans did not care about rules or traditions. They cared about results. Their results were devastating. Commander Tal of the Korathi fleet stood in the secure meeting room aboard his flagship, staring across the table at his greatest enemy. Admiral Vess of the Valan Republic looked just as uncomfortable as Tal felt. Neither of them had ever imagined they would be sitting in the same room, talking instead of fighting, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The human attacks had intensified over the past week, and both civilizations were suffering losses they could not afford. Traditional warfare had become impossible when faced with an enemy that refused to follow any of the established rules. "Your ships have been taking heavy losses as well," Tal said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Admiral Vess nodded slowly. "We lost 2 battlecruisers yesterday. The humans hit them while they were refueling at a supposedly secure station. Our intelligence officers still cannot figure out how they knew the ships would be there. They seem to know everything we are planning before we do it," Tal admitted. "Our communication networks have been compromised somehow. Every time we try to coordinate a response, they are already moving to counter it." The 2 commanders had been enemies for decades. They had fought each other in dozens of battles following the ancient traditions that governed warfare between their peoples. But now they faced a common threat that was unlike anything either civilization had encountered before. "My analysts believe the humans have fewer than 60 ships total," Vess said, "yet they are achieving tactical results that should require a fleet hundreds of times that size. Their methods are completely outside our understanding of warfare." Pulled up a holographic display showing the recent pattern of human attacks. Red markers indicated destroyed facilities, damaged ships, and disrupted supply lines. The destruction covered both Karathi and Valen territory equally, suggesting that the humans saw no difference between the two civilizations. They do not distinguish between us, he observed. To them, we are both simply obstacles to be removed. The question is what they want, Vess replied. Are they conquerors seeking to claim our territory? Are they explorers who stumbled into our conflict? We have no way of knowing their intentions. Before Tal could respond, both commanders received urgent communications from their respective fleets. The humans were attacking again, this time hitting targets deep inside both territories simultaneously. The coordinated assault was clearly designed to prevent either side from sending help to the other. They are trying to keep us separated, Tal realized. Every time we attempt to coordinate our responses, they create a crisis that forces us to focus on our own problems. Admiral Vess studied the incoming reports with growing alarm. The human attacks were becoming more sophisticated and more devastating. What had started as isolated strikes against military targets was evolving into a systematic campaign designed to cripple both civilizations. We need to work together, she said, speaking words that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. Neither of our fleets can handle this threat alone. The alliance between the Karathi and Valen was unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time in over 3 centuries, the two civilizations stopped fighting each other and began cooperating against a common enemy. Joint task forces were formed, combining the best elements of both military traditions, but even working together. They found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by the human forces. Marshal Reed, the human officer who had taken over strategic command from General Price, seemed to anticipate their every move. Combined Karathi-Valen fleets would arrive at battle sites, only to find that the humans had already accomplished their objectives and withdrawn. Sir, reported Captain Troy to Admiral Cross, the aliens have formed some kind of alliance. Intelligence indicates they are sharing resources and coordinating their responses to our operations. Cross nodded thoughtfully. He had been expecting this development. The humans had been applying pressure to both alien civilizations for weeks, forcing them to realize that their traditional enmity was a luxury they could no longer afford. What is Marshal Reed's assessment of the situation? Cross asked. Lee believes we have achieved our primary objective, sir. Both alien factions now understand that human military capabilities represent a significant threat to their continued existence. They are no longer focused on fighting each other. Cross walked to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. The human exploration fleet had traveled thousands of light years to reach this region of space, hoping to make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, they had become involved in a war that predated human spaceflight by centuries. But perhaps that involvement had been necessary. The war between the Karathi and Valen had been consuming resources and lives for generations, with no possibility of resolution. Both sides had become trapped in a cycle of violence that neither could break on their own. Sir, interrupted Commander West, we are receiving a transmission from the Alien Alliance. They're requesting a meeting under a flag of truce. Cross felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. A truce meeting could be the first step toward ending the violence that had consumed this region of space for so long. But it could also be a trap, or a prelude to an all-out assault on the human fleet. Where do they want to meet? He asked. Neutral space, sir. System on the border between their territories that neither side has claimed. They are proposing that each side bring only a small number of ships, that all weapon systems be powered down during the negotiations. Cross made his decision quickly. Tell them we accept. But make it clear that if this is some kind of trap, the consequences will be severe. The meeting took place 3 days later in the empty space around a dead star. 3 small fleets faced each other in a triangle formation, each maintaining a respectful distance from the others. For the first time since the conflict began, human and alien ships shared the same space without shooting at each other. Admiral Cross, Commander Tal, and Admiral Vess met aboard a neutral ship that had been hastily constructed for the occasion. The 3 commanders sat around a circular table, each representing a different approach to warfare and diplomacy. "We did not come here to conquer your territories or destroy your civilizations," Cross began. "We are explorers who became involved. In your conflict by accident, your methods of exploration are unusual," Tal replied with barely concealed hostility. "You have destroyed dozens of our ships and killed thousands of our people. You attacked us first," Cross pointed out. "Defended ourselves using the methods we know. If those methods seem harsh to you, perhaps you should consider why you forced us to use them." Admiral Vess leaned forward in her chair. "What do you want from us? What are your terms for ending this conflict?" Cross had been thinking about this question for days. The humans could probably defeat both alien civilizations if they chose to commit their full resources to the effort. But victory would come at a tremendous cost, and it would not solve the underlying problems that had caused the war in the first place. "We want peace," he said simply. "Not just an end to hostilities between humans and your civilizations, but an end to the war that has been consuming this region of space for centuries." "That is impossible," Tal said immediately. "The grievances between our peoples go back generations. There are wrongs that cannot be forgiven, territory that cannot be shared. And yet you are sitting here together, talking instead of fighting," Cross observed. "You have already proven that cooperation is possible when faced with a sufficient threat." Over the following hours, the three commanders worked out the framework for what would become known as the Galactic Accords. The agreement established new principles for interstellar relations. Based on human concepts of diplomacy rather than the honor-based traditions that had governed alien warfare, the humans would serve as mediators and peacekeepers, helping to resolve disputes between the Karathi and Valen without resorting to violence. In exchange, both alien civilizations would share their advanced technologies and scientific knowledge with humanity. Most importantly, the three civilizations would work together to establish trade routes and communication networks that would benefit all parties. The resources that had been wasted on warfare for centuries would be redirected toward exploration, development, and mutual prosperity. The signing of the Accords marked the end of the longest war in galactic history. But more than that, it represented the beginning of a new era of cooperation between species that had once considered each other to be irreconcilable enemies. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching as the first joint human-alien exploration mission departed for the outer rim of the galaxy. Ships from all three civilizations flew in formation, their crews working together toward common goals. The galaxy had been changed forever by humanity's arrival, not through conquest or destruction, but through the introduction of new ideas about how intelligent species could relate to each other. The age of endless war was over, and the age of cooperation had begun.